Welcome to On the Money Line, a podcast by MMA Play 365. I'm Newsome, and I'm here to break down UFC 316, which goes down this weekend. It's a big card, it's a pay-per-view. We've got two title fights, both bantamweight title fights, the men's bantamweight championship on the line, and so is the women's bantamweight championship on the line too. It's quite chalk city, to be fair, as well, from a betting perspective. You know, I think the parlays, it's definitely a parlay type of card if parlays is what you like to play and you don't mind playing them, because there's just not that many fights under, like, you know, minus 200, minus 250. So yeah, look, there's a lot of big favourites on the card, chalk city, but this is the reason why we do these podcasts. We'll talk about where the value is. We'll talk about what lines are maybe a little bit too wide, or what massive lines are justified as well. So we'll get into all that. We'll get our teeth into it. But just before we do, as always, if you're wanting to jump into the action this weekend, then make sure you do so at MMA Play 365. We've got something for every type of gambler. If you're a long-term gambler that likes written breakdowns so you can understand, you know, why we're picking that fighter to win and why we're recommending that fighter as a potential recommended bet, then we've got that section for you. If you're somebody that just likes to tail a professional handicapper, then we've got an official bet section, which that section is just listing the bets that is physically being played with the handicapper's money, which is myself. And then, of course, we've got a fun parlay section as well, which, like I've just mentioned, that could be very fun this weekend with the amount of bets or potential bets that are looking more like parlay fodder than straight bets. And of course, with every single betting subscription, we have Bayes AI, our UFC prediction software, which is on absolute fire at the minute. It's a great algorithm, produces some real good value as well, and we don't separate that from the handicapper analysis either. You get all of that in one subscription. All the subscriptions are super affordable. Our ethos is we want you to make the money back that you spend with us as quickly as you possibly can, so you can start profiting on top of your bets. And to do that as easy and as quickly as you possibly can, that's why those prices are so low. So if you're wanting to jump into the action, make sure you hit up MMAplay365.com. And with the introduction out the way, with the promo out the way, let's get down to breaking some fights. And of course, as always, we start with that main event. We've got the Bantamweight Championship on the line. It's a rematch as well. We've got Merab the Machine Dvalishvili versus Sean O'Malley 2. Now, again, I kind of don't want to come on to this fight and break it down and just say, look, nothing's going to change from the last time they fought. The outcome's going to remain the same. But the reality is, I do think that's what's going to happen. Now, what you will find is no analyst that is associated with the UFC is likely to be coming into breaking this fight down and telling you that, you know, it's going to go the same way as it went last time, because that's not good for production, that's not good for hype. You know, they need to be finding reasons why it won't be the same as last time and why it'll be more competitive. That's the job, and I completely understand it. And I've already started hearing things like that as well from analysts that are employed by the UFC on the broadcast. We heard it a little bit last week during last week's UFC event, even though it was a bit of a joke and an event with how everything actually played out. But I started hearing things like, okay, well, at the end of the last fight, Sean O'Malley hurt Merab to the body, and you know, maybe that's the path, that's the area where O'Malley needs to attack Merab to actually, you know, stop the movement and to find him. You know, it's not easy to find the head because he's constantly moving, but the body's always there. So these are the things that I'm starting to hear already. And to be fair, I'm not going to discredit that. Like, it's a good piece of analysis in regards to, look, it took O'Malley like almost an entire 5 rounds to find potentially the opening and the area of weakness of Merab to maybe shut him down a little bit, to stop that movement. But I just don't think that it's just going to be O'Malley just landing body shots on Merab Dvalishvili to take his title off him. I do think it's going to go pretty much the same way as it went last time. I just don't think there's been enough time between fight number 1 and fight number 2 for for O'Malley to have improved the wrestling and grappling defensively that much and enough to be able to stop the onslaught of Merab. And look, I was guilty last time out of betting Sean O'Malley. You know, I took the plus money. I thought that, you know, striker versus wrestler grappler, maybe Sean O'Malley can keep the distance, can manage the distance, use his footwork, use his movement, sniper straight down the middle, crack Merab every time Merab comes in. Merab's been cracked and hurt before, so I kind of went down that route with O'Malley, and it was probably, again, I'm always open and honest and transparent, it's probably one of the worst bets that I've made since I've been gambling in MMA for a number of years. So yeah, you know, I'm not going to fall into that trap again, although I will be pissed if, you know, O'Malley's now a much bigger favourite this time than I bet him last time and he actually gets it done, but I just don't see it. I think Merab, with his relentless pressure, his relentless wrestling pressure, I just think the takedowns are going to be there for him again. He's going to rinse and repeat again. I genuinely think if the UFC had 10-round fights, Merab would still fight in round 10 how he fights in round 1. So the cardio is like a massive weapon for him. And again, look, Sean O'Malley doesn't have bad cardio either, but when you're constantly getting taken down and having to stand back up, you know, it starts to get more frustrating and demoralising for someone like O'Malley, opposed to, you know, draining a gas tank. But again, like I say, I keep going over the same point here. I think the fight's gonna go, not just the result, but I think it's going to go down and play out in pretty much the exact same way as it played out last time. I think O'Malley will have moments just like he had last time, but ultimately I think that Merab is going to be able to close the distance, get the takedowns. He'll probably likely need 7, 8, 9 takedowns, you know, similar to what happened last time, but I think he gets it. I think he gets the takedowns when he wants them, and I just think he makes it horrible and grueling for O'Malley, who's going to probably struggle to spend too much time out in space, you know, striking from the outside in with, again, those long sniper strikes. Yeah, I think Merab's going to get the job done. So for those reasons, I'm picking Merab Dvalishvili to win this fight and still the UFC bantamweight champion. And in the next fight, in the co-main event, we've got the Women's Bantamweight Championship on the line. We've got Juliana Pena versus Kayla Harrison. Now, normally I spend quite a little bit of time on the main event, the co-main events, especially the title fights, but I kind of feel like with this card, potentially not. Like, I don't think I just did with Merab Dvalishvili, and I don't think I'm going to spend a lot of time either with this fight, because I just think it's an absolutely horrific fight for Juliana Pena. And again, you know, I've already been listening to, you know, some of the things that the UFC analysts are saying, and again, it's one of those where you have to take it with a pinch of salt. For those that have been around long enough to have been through like the Anderson Silva reign, the George St. Pierre reign, like you'll know that every single time those two fighters, specifically John Jones again as well, Habib again is another example of this. These dominant champions, even though I'm not saying Kayla Harrison's a dominant champion because she isn't a champion in the UFC yet, but what I'm trying to say is with dominant fighters, there's always got to be a script, there's got to be a debate, it was always the same, especially, again, I'll go back to GSP, like GSP will have a new opponent and it's like, okay, well, this is the best opponent that GSP has faced and we're really interested to see how it plays out, when in reality, we all know the likelihood of how that fight's going to play out and how dominant it's likely to be. GSP will dominate that fighter, and then the next time he's fighting, okay, well, this is a different fight to the last time. This is his biggest test, and that's just what you hear constantly, and it has to be like that because again, like the analysts aren't just going to come on a broadcast and say, okay, yeah, this fight is going to get destroyed. Like that's not what they're going to say. They have to put up some form of unbiased competitive approach to the analysis, but from my perspective, I just think that Pena's in for a rough night. I'm just not sure where she's better than Kayla Harrison. Like, Juliana Pena's game has always been the top side grappling game, you know, getting the fight down to the mat and doing well on top, but I think Harrison's the better grappler. I think she's a better wrestler. I think she's going to be the better takedown artist, again, with the judo background from a striking perspective. I don't think either of these fighters are like, you know, elite strikers, because that's not part of the game, but I definitely think Kayla Harrison is the better striker, hits harder, is more aggressive, more physical, bigger, stronger. I just really, again, like, I don't mean this in a disrespectful way to Pena. It's just sometimes fighters are just that good, and I just think Kayla Harrison is that good. There's a reason why she's like a -600, -700 favourite in this fight. Like, I get the betting line, but I just don't know how Pena wins this fight. Like, even if Kayla Harrison was to throw a kick and slip and Pena gets on top of Harrison, like, does Pena then do good work on top, potentially take her back and choke her? Well, no, I don't see that. I think Kayla Harrison will just make her way back up to her feet, and then she's probably already tied up with Pena, where, again, she's going to be stronger, she's going to be more physical, she's got that judo background, and I just think that Kayla Harrison probably turns herself being on her back to her getting back up to her feet and getting a takedown on Pena before Pena's done any type of work on top. I'm really struggling to see where Pena wins this fight and how she wins this fight. And look, if it goes to a decision, can we potentially look at, a controversial split decision that goes Pena's way? Well, again, I feel like if it's gone 5 rounds, Kayla Harrison's going to have dominated at least 3 rounds, more than likely 4 and 5 as well. But yeah, I'm not seeing the path to victory here for Pena outside of a puncher's chance, which, every fighter's got in the UFC with 4-ounce gloves. Every fighter's got that puncher's chance. Pena's no different. But I just think it's such a low percentage probability when you're looking at the outcome of this fight. So yeah, I think it's Kayla Harrison's time. I'm picking Kayla Harrison to win this fight and become the new UFC Women's Bantamweight Champion. And in the next fight, we've got Kelvin Gastelum versus Joe Pyfer. This is a rebooked fight. It's supposed to have gone down a few months ago. And it's interesting that the UFC have rebooked it, actually. I didn't know whether they would just have Pyfer go off in a different way and Gastelum go off in a different way. But the fact that they've remade this fight tells me that there's a purpose for it. At least that's where I'm looking at it anyway, because with Joe Pyfer, it's going to be one of these fights. If he wins, which, by the way, is a sizable favourite here again, Chalk City is about -400, I think, the last time I looked. So with Joe Pyfer, I feel like this is the fight that if he gets Gastelum's name, scalps the name on his record, I think that definitely elevates him to a position up in the rankings where he's starting to have some serious fights again. Now, normally this is one of these fights with an up-and-coming fighter where, they've done what they've needed to do against lower-level competition, but they've put a big win streak together, so now they're getting that step up in competition against, a UFC vet, somebody that's been around the top of the division for a while, but maybe not at the top anymore. But the thing is, Pyfer's already had that fight. He had it against Hermansson, 5 rounds, lost that fight against Hermansson. But for me, that was, because again, Hermansson's in and around where Kelvin Gastelum's been, the very similar types of fighters when you're looking at sort of where they've been positionally in the UFC. So I'm not saying they're similar in, physical attributes or styles, because they're certainly not. But where and how high they've been and how much they've been floating around sort of the rankings for years. Pyfer lost that fight to Hermansson. So what normally happens as the story goes is the fighter will have that step up, fall short, come back, get a win or two, and then step back up in competition and do much better. And I expect that story to play out here as well. Like when you're looking at how they match up, like Kelvin Gastelum's a gritty fighter. He's got that Mexican blood. You can tell that he's tough. He's very hard to get out of there. He'll be in your face, overwhelm you. He's also very well rounded. Like, he can strike, wrestle, grapple. He's very good everywhere. But the thing is, although Gastelum's not old, he's got a lot of miles on the clock. So he's been in wars. He's been around the top of the division for years, and it doesn't matter. Sometimes age doesn't matter so much. It's the toll that this sport takes on your body, and Gastelum has been around from such a young age that even though he's not that old now, the body there's wear and tear on the body, whereas Joe Pyfer, he's fresh, he's big, he's strong, he's powerful. He's very dynamic as well. So where I've said that Kelvin Gastelum's a good striker, wrestler, grappler, well, so is Joe Pyfer. Joe Pyfer can do it all as well. I just feel that when he fell short against Hermansson, that was just his time to fall short. Like, every fighter has that fight where, they've stepped up in competition after putting that win streak together in the UFC, and they've not quite been ready for that. But they've also gained a lot of experience and took a lot from the loss. And I feel like Pyfer's in the same situation. Now, I think when both of these are striking, I think Gastelum can do some good work on Pyfer as well, but I just think every time Pyfer lands on Gastelum, the impact is going to be much greater than the opposite way around. Gastelum landed on Pyfer, and I think that's going to matter. I think Kelvin Gastelum will get hit hard. I think even though he likes to come forward and is durable, I think there'll be a level of respect there very early on. And then it wouldn't even shock me to see Joe Pyfer potentially shoot a takedown and get Gastelum down. Like, again, Gastelum is very good defensively as well as offensively, but it doesn't mean that he can't get taken down. And if he is put on his back, I think Joe Pyfer could be quite heavy on top, like a blanket, landing good ground and pound, potentially looking for submissions. He's got a sneaky good submission game as well. So yeah, look, I think with the betting line, I understand the betting line. I don't really see too much value in Pyfer as a massive favourite, but I do understand why Pyfer is a big favourite. I just think that, like I say, he's in a straight 15-minute kickboxing fight. I think Pyfer can beat Gastelum, but then when you're starting to look at a fight that's maybe won and lost in the wrestling and grappling, I think I like Pyfer there as well. So there's multiple paths to victory for Pyfer, who's going to be the fresher fighter, the one that's hitting harder, and the one that's looking to elevate his career because he's still in sort of the early stages of his UFC career. For all those reasons that I've mentioned, I'm picking Joe Pyfer to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Vicente Luque versus Kevin Holland. Now, this is one of the favourites that you could get at that's under -250, although he is -250 at some books, but it's not one with total chalk. And that's Kevin Holland that's the favourite. But I don't know, I just find this a bit of a strange fight to be super confident on, because Vicente Luque was looking completely down and out. Again, he's not old, but just like I've said with Kelvin Gastelum, when you've been around for that long, and especially the wars that Luque's been in, like specifically, there was one point in time, like 2, 3, 4 years ago, where every fight that Luque was like, the UFC just knew how to match Luque up to get the best out of him and to get the best for an entertainment perspective for the fans. And Luque was just in war after war after war after war, and eventually his durability broke. Now, I don't think Kevin Holland is particularly like that one-punch knockout artist where, he's going to find that chin and just absolutely batter Luque. But Holland can still hit hard, so it wouldn't shock me if that durability is just broken a little bit too much for Luque. It still wouldn't shock me to see Holland land something to knock him out. But on the flip side, it's like super difficult to trust Kevin Holland as well, because he's so inconsistent with performances, because he likes to entertain, he likes to be a performer inside the cage, talk to his opponent, and he'll go through phases where, like 3 or 4 fights in a row, he's sort of looking like he's playing around inside the cage, talking and not really focused and driven to do absolutely everything necessary to win. But then he'll go on this win streak where, it looks like he's put all that behind him, and he is focused and he is determined and he is driven, and he performs really well. So it's like, which version of Kevin Holland are you going to get? Well, if it's the playful Kevin Holland against the Vicente Luque, I think Luque could potentially crack him and hurt him. But when you look at, taking all that out, out of the equation, because we don't necessarily know what version of Kevin Holland we are going to get in there. If you're just looking at skill set for skill set and where both fighters are at, I think Kevin Holland does pose a lot of issues for Luque, because he's taller, he's longer, I think he's more athletic, he's going to be faster at this stage of his career as well. So when it comes to Luque's got to find Holland. And bear in mind, this is a pay-per-view, so we're going to have the big UFC cage. Luque's going to have to work a lot harder if he wants to fight, if he wants to find Kevin Holland and land on him. But Holland's movement's good laterally, circling back out if his back's too close to the cage, exiting out and getting back into the centre. So I think that Holland's going to do a good job of just being difficult to deal with more than anything inside the cage, but then Holland will land whilst being difficult as well, and that's where I'm starting to lean on the side of Holland, because although it wouldn't shock me for Luque to get into range, land a big left hook, hurt Holland, or make Holland shoot on him and then grab that anaconda choke or a dash choke or another front choke that Vicente Luque really specialises in, like, that wouldn't shock me so much. Like, there's a reason why Kevin Holland isn't out at -400, -500 himself. Like, Luque has a path to victory here, but when I'm looking at style versus style, I'm looking at the fighter that's fresher, that's more athletic, that's not had his durability cracked, that's going to be a better mover, quicker on the feet, taller, longer, can fight at multiple ranges. And that fight is Holland, and it's always difficult to pick against fighters that have got that type of upside and those types of advantages. So for all the reasons that I've mentioned, I'm picking Kevin Holland to win this fight. And in the next fight, this is going to be one of the highlights for the card, in my opinion. We've got Mario Bautista versus the UFC newcomer Patchy Mix. Now, Patchy Mix has come from PFL/Bellator 20-1. People are calling him the best bantamweight MMA fighter on the planet now. I think a certain Merab Dvalishvili, Sean O'Malley, Umar Nurmagomedov might have something to say about that. So I'm not going to jump on the bandwagon of he's the best bantamweight in the world. Let's find out if he's the best bantamweight in the world once he's at the top of the division and he's having to deal with a Merab or an Umar or an O'Malley. Let's find out when we get there. But for right now, he's got Mario Bautista in front of him. Now, initially, when I saw the betting line, because, look, Patchy Mix isn't one of those fighters that's got massive chalk on him. He isn't one of those favourites that's like minus 300, minus 400, minus 500. I was kind of expecting him to be within that price range. Now, initially, I was quite surprised when I've seen him, because, look, right now he's anywhere from like minus 150 to like minus 180, minus 190, wherever you look, whatever bookie you're looking at. But actually, when you look at the three big signings that the UFC have taken from PFL/Bellator, over the last X amount of years, you look at Michael Chandler, he came in as an underdog against Hooker. You look at Michael Venom Page, he came in as an underdog against Kevin Holland. Patricio Pitbull, he came in as an underdog against Yair Rodriguez. So all these big fighters, big stars that are coming from Bellator and PFL have all come in as underdogs. So maybe Mix being a favourite is testament to actually how good he actually is, because look, the fight with how it's matched up reminds me a lot of Michael Venom Page and Kevin Holland in regards to, look, the UFC have got a big star on their hands, a talented star, and they need to match him up for that UFC debut the right way. Well, let's do it on a pay-per-view, because that's going to get you maximum exposure, and let's give you an opponent that is going to test you, that's on a win streak, that is going to be, they're not going to go away, they're not going to be got at too easily, but also an opponent that you're better than. And that rung true for Michael Venom Page. I know a lot of people picked Kevin Holland to beat MVP. I took MVP as an underdog there. And the fight played out exactly how I thought. It was matched accordingly. Kevin Holland was game. He had his moments. He wasn't easy to get at or easy to get out of there, but Michael Venom Page was better and it showed. And I kind of feel like the same thing is going to happen here with Patchy Mix and Bautista, because look, Bautista's a good fighter. He's quick, he's athletic, he's very dynamic, he's elusive with his movement, he can switch stances, his striking's good, he's got sneaky power. I'm not saying it's like raw, devastating power, but it's sneaky power. If he lands and connects, he can definitely hurt you. But then he's also got some wrestling, some grappling, all offensively, all defensively as well. Like, he's in this position for a reason, although, to be fair, I don't think he should be on a win streak, because I do think that Jose Aldo was a borderline robbery. Like, Aldo beat Bautista for me. So, look, I'm not taking anything away from Bautista. He's still a good fighter. I just don't think he won his last fight. But again, coming back to this fight, like, Bautista's going to be tricky to deal with. But Patchy Mix is an elite grappler in MMA with good wrestling to go with it. So he can get fights down to the mat where he's best grappling. He's got a sick back take. He'll choke you out if you make, if you give him half an inch of a mistake, he'll take it and he'll choke you. Like I say, he's an elite grappler with wrestling to accompany it, and that's always a dangerous proposition. But then on the feet, the dude can strike as well. Like, again, he's not like, the first name that's popped to my head is not like an Israel Adesanya type of elite elusive striker, but Mix can compete with the best in the world striking. Like, if this is a 15-minute kickboxing fight, the fight's much closer than what I would think it will be as an MMA fight. But I still think Mix could beat Bautista in a 15-minute kickboxing fight. But adding the fact that you've got wrestling and grappling, because it is an MMA fight, I just think Mix is going to be better here. I just think he's going to be overwhelming for Bautista. Like, for as good as Bautista can be defensively, especially with the wrestling. I think Mix can get him down. Like Bautista has been taken down before. I think Mix can get him down. I think once Mix gets him down, I've got a funny feeling Bautista might actually be a little bit tricky early on to keep down. But I think if Mix starts reshooting and starts getting 2, 3, 4 takedowns, I think Bautista slowly starts to, succumb to that grappling of Mix and slowly stops being able to get back up to his feet as quickly and as easily. And Mix will do better work on top. Maybe Bautista just gets sick of it and just like shows his back to quickly get back up to his feet because he's had enough of being on his back. And if he does that, Mix will sink a hook in and then take his back, even if it's against the cage. So I just feel that Patchy Mix is, again, like, I feel like he's beaten opponents that are better than Bautista and opponents that Bautista's fought himself. So I think Mix is, again, I'm coming back to like a levels thing here. I always say it in MMA, there is levels, and I think Mix is a level above Bautista. Bautista's good. He's going to have his moments. He's going to cause some problems throughout the fight. He's not going to be got at too easily. He's not going to, you're not going to get him out that easily either. But when you're looking at which fighter wins the fight because which fighter's better, I think Mix is a level above. So for those reasons, I'm picking Patchy Mix to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Bruno Silva versus Joshua Van. Now, I think this is a good fight for Joshua Van, but he's got to mind his P's and Q's at the same time because, when you're looking at how much chalk, and I know I keep saying this, but when you look at how much chalk's on this card with the big favourites, I do think 1 or 2 of these big favourites are gonna be dealt an upset in the fights. Now, I'm not saying this is going to be the one because I'm not picking Bruno Silva to win the fight. But if this was one of the ones that was an upset, I don't think many should be that shocked because Bruno Silva's got that explosive power. Like he can definitely be got at, and it's quite clear with Bruno Silva where he's not the better fighter and he'll get beat. But he's so explosive. Like if Van just comes forward, a little bit recklessly, especially earlier on where he tends to start fights quite slow, more often than not. If that's Silva throwing a flying knee and Van walking onto it, or Silva, just landing a big right hand whilst Van's hands are down himself, like something explosive like that. Bruno Silva's got the power at this weight class to end fights and cause problems, and Van's been hurt and dropped before, so let's not pretend that Van's absolutely bulletproof here. And again, it's just one of those, like, just mind your P's and Q's for Van. That's all I'm saying, because from a technical aspect, I think Van's outmatched grappling, but when it comes to the wrestling, I think Van's good enough to defend takedowns, and that's the key thing, because Bruno Silva's biggest gap in skill here, differential, is within the grappling. But how likely is he going to get to a position in this fight where he's able to use his grappling topside? If he shoots takedowns on Van, you can never say never when it comes to takedowns. Like, I believe that any fighter can get taken down if the entry's right and if the takedown's good. But I just don't think that it's likely that he gets him easily. Like, Van does a good job of defending takedowns, sprawling, getting back up to his feet. And I just feel that that's where Bruno Silva's going to lack in that fight, because if he could get the takedowns, then I actually would like him to win more than what I actually do right now. But I just don't think the wrestling's going to be that accessible here. And then when they're on the feet striking, yes, Bruno Silva, as I've already mentioned, is explosive. He does hold power. But I think Van is younger, hungrier, fresher, better mover, quicker, more athletic. And I just feel that, again, it's one of those fights when you've got all those upsides and advantages, it's going to be very tough for the opponent, to be effective in the fight. And I think that's the key point here. How effective is Bruno Silva going to be with his style against Joshua Van and the style of Joshua Van and the physical traits, attributes and upside that Van has? I just don't think it's going to be that effective at all. So mind your P's and Q's for Van and he'll get the job done. I'm picking Joshua Van to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Ariane, Lipski, Da Silva versus Cong, Wang. Now, again, another interesting fight, because similar to what I said earlier, actually, with Kelvin Gastelum and Joe Pyfer, specifically with Joe Pyfer, like, fighters that have got a load of hype on them, that have come into the UFC, that are dominant, they'll take that loss that nobody expected them to take. Now, it's a little bit different because with Joe Pyfer, I categorise that as stepped up in competition and took a loss. Whereas Kong Wang didn't step up in competition when she took her loss. It was just one of those upsets that nobody expected. So again, these types of losses that are unexpected can come in different formats. But the point that I'm trying to make is, I think Kong Wang has took the loss that she needed to take already for the foreseeable. I think the next time Kong Wang loses is when she's potentially fighting in the top 5, top 10 of the division. And to be fair to Lipski, she is ranked 13th, but again, I just think there's a bit of a difference between that 10 to 15 than there is 10 to 5, and there's a level difference for the most part within that. Obviously, every situation's different, but just from a generalist perspective, I just feel that Kong Wang, look, she is stepping up in competition. You can't deny that, but I just feel that she's took the one loss that she was going to take probably for the next couple of years. I genuinely like Kong Wang. She's a high level kickboxer that, you know, has got good wrestling. She's got good grappling. She fights at a high pace. She's very difficult to deal with. She's 100 miles an hour inside the cage constantly. And although Lipski is very, you know, well-rounded and very good herself, there's been inconsistent performances throughout her entire UFC career. I think she came in with hype and she didn't quite live up to it, but that's kind of not her fault. That's the hype that the public puts on her. And it took her a while to really find her feet in the UFC. But she's still one of them where she'll put a couple of wins together, step up in competition and lose. Now, this is not the step up in competition, so this is why the fight's interesting. And again, you know, talking about big favourites losing, if this was one of those fights where the big underdog won, again, I just wouldn't be that shocked. But when it comes to a straight pick and prediction, I do kind of see, like, listen, if Kong Wang was like a pick'em here, every man and the dog would just better to the point where she would end up going out to like -300, -350, which is what she's at now. I do think once people start racking up the parlays, she'll be a parlay piece. I think she'll go out further as well to maybe -400, -450. So it's one of them where, look, she's that price for a reason, because she can't be anything close to, like, even -200. I think people would just start absolutely hammering her. And look, again, coming back to this fight, style versus style, I think both fighters are really well-rounded, but the pace, the pressure, the aggressiveness that Kong Wang fights, and the fact that, you know, when you're looking at striker versus striker, I think Kong Wang is probably the better technical striker, more effective striker. And then when you start with the wrestling and grappling, like, Lipski's good, especially with the grappling, but only against opponents that, again, I know it's a cliche, but opponents that she is a better technical grappler than. Whereas with Kong Wang, the scrambles are good, the positioning's good, and I just feel that if they hit the mat, Kong Wang's going to be better there as well. So again, I'm thinking striking, Wang's better, grappling, Wang's better, the wrestling is almost irrelevant to talk about, because if anybody hits a takedown here, they're both good scramblers, so it's going to be who's the better scrambler ends up in the better position. And then again, I think Wang, the scrambling falls within the grappling, so again, I think Wang's better there as well. I just feel that, yeah, look, I don't see a ton of value in like -350 on Wang, but I do think that she's the side here. So for those reasons, I'm picking Kong Wang to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Serghei Spivac versus Waldo Cortes-Acosta. Now, I might sound like a broken record with Cortes-Acosta, but I feel like, again, I haven't looked back at every pick and prediction, but I feel like I pick against him in pretty much every fight. There might be one or two that I haven't. And look, you might think it's crazy. I'm just not high on him, which again might sound insane considering he's 6-1 in the UFC. But again, you've got to look at the levels of competition. The 6 fighters that Waldo Cortes-Acosta has beaten aren't at the highest level from a UFC perspective. So again, you can sort of forgive me a little bit, at least I'm hoping that, you know, yes, he's 6-1 and he's on a 4-fight win streak, and, you know, that's great, but he's taken a big step up in competition here against Serghei Spivac. And Serghei Spivac is somebody that's been around, you know, fighting some of the best fighters in the UFC heavyweight division for years. It's actually weird as well, because Spivac's the younger fighter, which is crazy. You would automatically assume that Cortes-Acosta's the younger fighter, but I don't think the age is going to play a factor in this fight, if I'm being honest. I actually think levels of competition and skill set is going to be the factor with who wins and who loses this fight. And I am leaning on the side of Spivac here because, look, Spivac, like I say, he's been a fighter that's super serviceable. When he does step up in competition, that's when he normally falls short, but he'll put these win streaks together and look phenomenal before he takes the step up in competition. Like the Ciryl Gane fight, for example, that's the best example to use. You know, he was looking absolutely unbelievable, Spivac, and he rightly so got that step up against the Ciryl Gane, but then just got absolutely destroyed. But Waldo Cortes-Acosta isn't a Ciryl Gane. Like, this is Cortes-Acosta's big step up in competition. Now, the only other fighter that Waldo Cortes-Acosta's fought that I'm actually quite high on, and I think he's very good, very well-rounded, is Marcos Rogerio de Lima. And ironically, that's the one loss that he took. Now, interestingly, in that fight, he also got taken down 3 times by Marcos Rogerio de Lima, whereas Serghei Spivac, the takedowns is his game. He's actually quite reliant as well. Like, he lands a lot of takedowns per 15 minutes. Like, his average is quite high, and his completion rate is also very good as well. And then considering, like I say, Cortes-Acosta, the only fighter that has resembled any type of wrestler that he's fought in the UFC was his one loss, and he got taken down 3 times. So again, you're putting 2 and 2 together here. I'm kind of getting 4. I think that, look, Cortes-Acosta is dangerous on the feet, but Serghei Spivac isn't a fighter you're going to hit and he's just going to drop down. And like, Spivac's a fighter that's been competing with some high level fighters in the UFC, and I just feel when you're looking at how this fight plays out, I think that Cortes-Acosta, well, he's got to close the distance and come forward to try and land on Spivac, but I think Spivac's going to have a good game. Like, he's got good fight IQ, and you can tell he sticks to a game plan, which is another reason why I think that, you know, I think he's going to get the job done here. I think Spivac, they're just going to have the game plan for Spivac to close the distance, get a hold of Cortes-Acosta and put him on his back. And with Spivac on top of Cortes-Acosta, I don't think Cortes-Acosta gets up. I think Spivac's going to be that much better than him, that heavier on top, that much of a better grappler, to the point of I could see Cortes-Acosta doing something crazy, like an unforced error to try and stand back up. Like maybe it's something as similar as showing you back, trying to stand back up, and then Spivac just takes an opportunity and gets him out of there. I wouldn't rule out a Waldo Cortes-Acosta knockout. Like I say, I know Spivac doesn't go away easily, but Cortes-Acosta does hit hard. He is quite explosive. And of course, this is the heavyweight division where your puncher's chances already elevated, regardless of who you are. So I do think that you can't rule out a Cortes-Acosta knockout, but I just think this fight's going to be more than Cortes-Acosta just throwing something, hitting Spivac and knocking him out. I think that we are going to see a mixed martial arts contest here, and I think Spivac's the better mixed martial artist. So for those reasons, I'm picking Serghei Spivac to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got the UFC newcomer Ju Sang-Yu versus Jeka Saragih. Now, Ju Sang-Yu making his UFC debut, as I just said, and again, he's one of the chalky favourites. So, again, this is another one of those big favourites that I could potentially see an upset. And I don't know whether I'm being like slightly biased. I've got no idea why I'm biased towards Saragih. There's just something about him. Like, I've always had a soft spot for Saragih. I just love the fact that he's this small little ball of energy, like a John Lineker type of fighter. Like, I always love John Lineker as well. Like this small ball of energy type of fighter that has to close the distance and throw bombs to close the distance, and you know, if it lands on you, you go into sleep. Now, Ju Sang-Yu, I think, is going to be much more physical here. I think he's going to be bigger, and again, like, I understand why he's a favourite. Again, Jeka Saragih hasn't really, you know, he's not really shown that he's going to be dominant at this level in the UFC, but he's certainly capable of a UFC win. So I definitely think he's a UFC caliber fighter. And with Ju Sang-Yu making his UFC debut, again, yeah, I just don't really know what to expect here. The one thing I will say is Ju Sang-Yu, when he gets in a top position on the ground grappling, he can lay heavy on top. He can be a blanket. And that's where Saragih has fallen short before. What Saragih will want is this crazy explosive fight where they're both winging bombs, exchanging combinations, and hoping that his punch lands first before Yu's. But even in that type of fight, I do think Yu could land on Saragih and knock him out as well. But then outside of that type of fight, if you're looking at a full mixed martial arts fight, if you can take Saragih down, I think you can spend a lot of time on top as well, do good work on top grappling. I'm not saying he gets him out of there, but I'm just saying that I think he can get on top of Saragih and run the clock down. Minutes will go down, therefore he'll be winning the minutes, winning the rounds. So I kind of feel like there's a couple of paths to victory here. I think even in a 15-minute technical kickboxing fight, I think you could potentially win a decision as well. Like I say, for Saragih has got to close that distance regularly and hope that he can land hard on you. And I actually could see that happening. Like, I don't think it's a low percentage probability when you're looking at the outcome of a fight, but I have to pick the fighter that I think has got multiple paths to victory because, like I say, for as live as Saragih is to find that knockout, I think Yu's also live for that same knockout. But I also think you could potentially be better over 3 rounds on point striking. And then when you add in the wrestling and the topside grappling, I think that's a path to victory for you as well. So I am siding on the side of you. I'm picking Ju Sang Yu to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Azamat Murzakanov versus Brendson Ribeiro. Now, I feel like this is a horrible fight for Ribeiro. I definitely think this is one of the big favourites in Murzakanov that is actually going to win. Well, I say actually, like, a lot of them are going to lose. I don't think a lot of them are going to lose. I just think we might see 1 or 2 big favourites lose throughout the entire card. Mathematically, you know, it's not often that we go through a card where all the favourites win. So I do think 1 or 2 of the big favourites might lose, but I don't think one of those is going to be Murzakanov. Brendson Ribeiro is an entertaining fighter. I can see why the UFC are putting him on like pay-per-view cards, but like from a skill set perspective, I think Murzakanov's just like light years ahead of him here. From a striking perspective, I think Murzakanov's better. Defensively, he's good as well, and that's going to be a key against Ribeiro because Ribeiro can be quite explosive, reckless, come forwards, get in your face and look to take you out, make you crumble under his pressure, but Murzakanov stoic and he hits hard as fuck, even moving backwards as well. So even Ribeiro coming forwards, it just wouldn't shock me if Murzakanov just took a slight step, take an angle, big left hook or, you know, big straight right as Brendson Ribeiro's coming out to land on him. I just feel that, yeah, Murzakanov's got power backwards, forwards, a lot more stoic, and I just feel that once Ribeiro realises that his pressure isn't going to crumble Murzakanov, that's going to set Ribeiro on the back foot. Murzakanov will apply that slow, steady pressure, close the distance, start landing on him. I think Murzakanov's going to be live for a big knockout here. If Brendson Ribeiro tries taking Murzakanov down, I just don't think... Again, you can never say never, but I just don't think that type of game plan is going to be effective here. I feel like it's going to be, even if Ribeiro did manage to take Murzakanov down, I do think that it's going to harm Ribeiro more than Murzakanov when you look at like the cardio and the gas tank. And then once Murzakanov's back up to his feet, I think he gets back to, you know, to torching Ribeiro. I just think it's a horrible fight for Brendson Ribeiro. Sure, the big boys and he can land a hard punch and knock Murzakanov out, but Murzakanov's tough, man. Like, I just don't see Ribeiro landing something on Murzakanov and Murzakanov just dropping and getting flatlined. But again, crazier things have happened. But for the sake of this pick and prediction, I think Murzakanov's one of the big favourites that is going to get the job done. So for those reasons, I'm picking Azamat Murzakanov to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Quillan Salkilld versus Yanal Ashmouz. Now, I really like that they've got, again, a stoic, tough opponent for Quillan Salkilld. Salkilld was probably one of my breakthrough prospects in the UFC of recent times. I genuinely think this kid's going to be a star. Like, he's just good. Like, he's got that deceptive power. He's got a tall frame. He'll mix in kicks with his punches. He can wrestle. He can grapple. He's quick. He's tough. Like, Salkilld for me is definitely one of the prospects that I'm high on in the UFC. And in his debut, like, it ended so quick. Like, I wanted to see more of Salkilld, and I actually think the debut, if that fight had played out, we could have potentially seen a dominant performance from Salkilld where we see a little bit of everything. But of course, the flash KO came very early, and I just don't think that Yanal Ashmouz is gonna go out like that here. I do think this is going to be the fight that we really see at this stage of Salkild's career, because remember he's super fresh in the UFC. I do think this is going to be a good early test for Salkilld. I think Yanal Ashmouz is a good striker, will come forwards, will try and bang, he can wrestle and grapple as well. So Salkild's he's going to have to put in a performance here to beat Ashmouz. I think he could absolutely whitewash him here, but if he whitewashes him, it's because he's on, he's sharp, he's focused, he's firing on all cylinders. It's not going to be one of these where Salkilld can half-arse it and get past Ashmouz. Like, Ashmouz is much better than that. But with that being said, I see nothing but a Quillan Salkilld, sharp, firing from all cylinders, coming out guns blazing. I just feel that Salkilld is going to be on it in the moment. He seems like a kid that's going to shine under the biggest lights and on the biggest stage. So with this being a UFC 316 pay-per-view, I think he's absolutely going to take that opportunity and shine. When it comes to the striking, I think Salkilld does have to mind his P's and Q's, because Ashmouz can come forward, can wing some big bombs, but whilst Ashmouz is landing the big winging hooks, I think Salkild's going to be firing like a sniper straight down the middle. I think he's going to be landing before Ashmouz lands on him. I don't think Salkilld will get sucked into a big, sort of exchange of combinations with wide hooks and big bombs, or even if Ashmouz does get into that boxing range and starts to wing the wide hooks at Salkilld. I think, again, the short strikes up the middle, uppercuts, knees to the body, knees to the head. Salkilld is got a full arsenal in regards to his skill set. So, again, like, if this is the one that Salkilld loses, I'd be quite surprised, if I'm being honest. Like, I'm not saying Ashmouz is a bad fighter, I'm just that high on Salkilld. I think even if Ashmouz tries taking Salkilld down, I think he could potentially get him down, but it's keeping him down that's the issue. I think Salkilld will get straight back up to his feet, and I think on the feet is where he's going to be super effective, landing hard punches, straight shots, moving well, mixing in kicks, making Ashmouz throw and miss and get frustrated. I think it's going to be another good showing for Salkilld. So for those reasons, I'm picking Quillan Salkilld to win this fight. And in the next fight, strangely, we've got Markel Medeiros versus UFC newcomer Mark Chowinski. Now, I say strangely because Medeiros was supposed to fight last week, and it was him that pulled out against Balaji. So I don't know whether he maybe had a stomach bug or, some sort of 24, 48 hour illness where he probably wasn't going to be cleared to fight and unwell, but recovered by, 1 week's time. Like, that seems like the most logical reason, maybe a bit of food poisoning or something. But yeah, he was supposed to fight Oki last week. I liked him against Oki, especially as an underdog as well. I thought he would have performed well against Oki. But instead, he's fighting 1 week later, UFC 316, against Mark Chowinski. Now, Medeiros has pushed out to like -300, -320, and I think the line's too wide. And again, you're looking at, potentially big favourites that might lose. I think this is another one of them. Like, I'm not picking Chowinski for what it's worth. I do think that, experience matters, and there's elements of Chowinski's game that I'm just not sure on yet, not convinced, and I'm not saying they're not there. I just need to see more of him. And I say more of him against a level of opponent like that of a Markel Medeiros, for example. But I just think that, banking on Markel Medeiros to win at -320, I just think is risky. Like, Medeiros, like I said last week, I still think he's got raw green aspects of his fight. Like, especially when it comes to the wrestling and grappling, like, he can get taken down and he can get back up, to his credit. But the fact is, he just looks still like he's not fully completed that aspect of his development yet. Now, again, he's training at the MMA lab, so he will absolutely be fixing that. At some point, that will get fixed, and it might be... I said this last week in that breakdown, because Balaji Oki, I thought, would try and wrestle Medeiros if they fought. Maybe that aspect of his game has been fixed, and we just haven't seen it yet. And the thing is, with Mark Chowinski does his best work on the mat. So, again, like, you're looking at style versus style, you've got a bit of a clash here, because Medeiros on the feet, I think he's absolutely going to torch Chowinski. Like, Medeiros is good, like, very, very good on the feet. I feel like he's slick, he's quick, he's efficient, he lands well, he knows when to throw and knows when not to throw, and he's just, like I say, the best sort of adjective to use is just, he's super efficient on the feet. Whereas Chowinski, like I say, Chowinski can compete on the feet as well, but I just think Markel Medeiros is way better on the feet. Now, where Chowinski is going to probably want to take this fight is down to the mat. Now, he could probably take Medeiros down. I don't think it's going to be easy, and I think Medeiros will defend some takedowns, but it's just how dominant is Chowinski going to be on top of Medeiros. And even though it's if you're going to talk to me about where Medeiros is weakest, I would say within the wrestling and grappling defensively. But is Chowinski's offensive game good enough to keep Medeiros down? And that's where I'm a little bit unsure and where I need to see more of it, because Chowinski has been somewhat dominant against opponents that I just don't think are as good as Medeiros. So now Chowinski is coming to the UFC, and it's short notice as well. So what's the cardio going to be like if he's coming in with a wrestling and grappling heavy approach? I just don't know. I just don't think it's the one for Chowinski against Medeiros. But I could be wrong, because like I say, sometimes when you watch fighters against a lower level of competition than what they're facing right now, so Chowinski's opponents outside the UFC, maybe Chowinski was just doing what he had to do, and what was expected of him to do against that level of opponent, and he can step it up against a better level of opponent like a Medeiros. But until I see that, I'm not going to be convinced by it. I haven't seen the raw grappling of Chowinski to think, right, he's going to come into the UFC and just wipe through everybody on the mat. He's not that type of fighter. I think Medeiros is going to be good enough to prevent the fight being won and lost from a wrestling and grappling perspective, therefore creating a fight that's won and lost from a striking perspective. And I do think Medeiros is a level above Chowinski on the feet. So for those reasons, I'm picking Markel Medeiros to win this fight. And in the next fight to break down, the last one on the podcast, I don't know if this will be the first fight to go off, because it's a really good fight. We've got Khaos Williams versus Andreas Gustafsson. That's right, Gustafsson was, involved in one of the many messes of the UFC last week. Not the UFC's fault, just fighters pulling out, not being able to fight, make weight, medicals, all that sort of stuff. There was so much that went wrong last week, and Gustafsson lost his opponent last week. That's now, I believe, the second or third opponent that Gustafsson's lost in the UFC, and he's still yet to make his UFC debut. I'm getting sick of breaking down Andreas Gustafsson UFC debut fights, because I think this is like the third time that I'm about to do it. So yeah, look, hopefully this fight actually goes ahead. From Khaos Williams' side, he was supposed to fight Uros Medic. Medic pulled out. He was then had a replacement with another fighter, a UFC debutant. That fighter pulled out really quick as well. Tapology has it as failed physicals, potentially, couldn't get his medicals done, or his medicals weren't up to, the standards that the UFC require. I don't know. But now he's fighting Gustafsson. Like, Khaos Williams lost two opponents, and Gustafsson was just like, well, hey, I've lost my opponent, let's do it. And the UFC were like, okay, this is good. And I actually think, out of all the fights that Gustafsson was booked in, and Khaos Williams was booked in, this is the best outcome. Like, this is definitely the best fight for Khaos Williams, and it's definitely the best fight for Gustafsson. I think it's a much better fight that we found ourselves in. So I am excited. Once again, I'm super excited for a Gustafsson UFC debut. And if you've listened to my breakdowns prior on previous podcasts, so again, just go back to last week if you want to and listen to my breakdown of Gustafsson. I'm super stoked for Gustafsson. He's big, he's strong, he's physical, he's stoic. He's a fighter that can go into wars, get into a bloody mess on his face, have blood everywhere, still knock his opponent out. He's a fighter that I've seen him in KSW behind closed doors. Again, that fight, as I said last week, is just super hard to find online, just because I think KSW have got their own pay-per-view platform, potentially their own library, like a similar to UFC Fight Pass, and it's just not available publicly, at least not what I can see. But I saw that Gustafsson fight against Damian Janikowski, where, again, it was a fight that was super close. Gustafsson performed well, and more importantly, Gustafsson managed things from a wrestling and grappling perspective against Janikowski, who's a silver medalist in Greco-Roman wrestling. So he's been in there and dealt with a good level of wrestler. Now, with Khaos Williams isn't the type of fighter that's going to want to take Gustafsson down. I think Williams will see this fight as an opportunity to get Gustafsson swinging, get into exchanges and try and knock him out, and that's a possible outcome. The thing is with Gustafsson, if he was facing Chaos Williams here, who was quite powerful but more predominantly a wrestler, I think Gustafsson probably should be a favourite in this fight. And now I do think that Gustafsson, with where he's currently at, from a betting perspective, is slightly too wide. He's plus 200. I don't think he should be a 2-1 underdog here. I think it should be closer to a slight underdog. And again, I'm being fair here, I think, because, look, I'm not saying Gustafsson should be a favourite here against Chaos Williams. Chaos Williams is a good fighter. He's been in the UFC for a number of years now, fought on a lot of good fighters, and proved that he can compete. So I don't think that it would be fair me saying Gustafsson should be a favourite. But look, if Gustafsson was like plus 110, plus 120, plus 125 at the most, I could understand that. I think that's probably where the true odds lie. But at plus 200, I think the line's been pushed too far out. I don't think that the betting market are giving Gustafsson enough respect here. Like, Chaos Williams, for as good and as dangerous as he is a very brute fighter, and he can be got at from a technical perspective. And the one thing that's going to be interesting here is who's going to be the stronger fighter, because I kind of feel that we're going to get a fight here. They're both huge and physical fighters for the division, but I think that we're going to get Chaos Williams that's going to be naturally stronger, but stronger when fresh early on. So I think in the early moments, if they're clinching up, if Gustafsson tries using that dog-like approach where he'll force his opponents back against the cage and grind on them, I do think that Williams will be able to reverse positions and put it on Gustafsson as well. But I don't think Gustafsson's going to be completely outmatched physically, so I think he might be able to, reverse positions. And again, I think they'll both trade off with the physicality, but where I think Gustafsson's going to have success here is if he has that type of approach in this fight. I think that Chaos Williams' gas tank will drain quicker than Gustafsson's, and I could be wrong here. Again, it's just an assumption based on what I've seen. I haven't seen either fighter like totally gassed, but I just think with the muscle mass that Chaos Williams carries, I just think that once that lactic acid starts flowing, I just feel that the gas tank will affect him more than it will Gustafsson. And if I'm right in saying that, the longer the fight goes on, I think the more efficient Gustafsson will be, because Chaos Williams will be slowing down and Gustafsson can start picking things up. So I do think that Gustafsson's live to getting knocked out here. But I also think Williams is live to getting knocked out as well. Like, if Gustafsson lands hard on him, they're both big enough to knock each other out. So then when you're looking at technical ability, I think that if you're looking at 3 rounds, who wins a decision? Well, I think it ultimately depends what type of fight we've got. If it's a point scoring, a volume-based decision, I think Chaos Williams wins it. But if it's a control-based decision, I think Gustafsson wins it. So again, like, it's just a super close fight, and I'm giving the respect to Chaos Williams, saying that he should be a very slight favourite in this fight just because he's been in the UFC longer and fought a higher level of competition. But I do think Gustafsson's live to win here for a fighter that I think should be anywhere from plus 110 to plus 125 that's sitting at plus 200. I think the line's too wide, and more often than not, when I'm seeing a really close fight and one side's a bigger underdog than I believe they should be, more often than not, I will, from a straight pick and prediction perspective, the fact that we're on a betting podcast will side with that underdog. So I'll do that here. For those reasons, I'm picking Andreas Gustafsson to win this fight. And that's all for this episode of the podcast. Once again, thank you everybody for tuning in. Those that do tune in every week, I really do appreciate you. If you're listening for the first time, then I appreciate you giving me a chance as well. If you are listening on one of the podcast platforms like Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, then you can jump over to YouTube, to our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/MMA Play 365, where you can leave a comment. It is me that gets back to everybody that does go into the reply. So if you want to tell me where we agree, where we disagree, who you're betting on, who you really want to cash, who your favourite fighter is of the card, where you see the biggest value. In fact, one thing I am interested in, if you want to drop a comment, just give me the one fight where you think is going to be the biggest upset, because I do think there's going to be a couple of big favourites that lose. Which one do you think that's going to be? Which big favourite do you think is the one that's going to pull off which big underdog do you think is going to pull off the upset? So leave that comment if that's what you want to do. But yeah, All in all, thank you for tuning in. I really appreciate it. And one last time, if you're wanting to jump into the action this weekend, then make sure you do so at MMAplay365.com. We've got something for every type of gambler, written breakdowns, fun parlays, official bets. We've got AI with Base AI, our UFC prediction software, which gives you a percentage prediction for every possible outcome of every UFC fight every weekend. It's on absolute fire right now, the AI is. And everything's super affordable. It's $5 for one event, $10 a month, or $99 for an entire 12 months. Everything's super affordable, so you can make the money back on what you spend with us as quickly as you possibly can, so you can start profiting on top of your bets. And that's all at MMAplay365.com. I'm Newsome. Thanks for listening. I'll see you again next week.